You might remember that President Trump is not in court today on this Wednesday. Now, there will be, of course, there could be orders coming out from the court today, and many are wondering whether this is the day we are going to see orders from Judge Merchan on the gag order. Now, the judge was very tough on the Trump attorneys. I said this on Newsmax this morning. I think, listen, this judge, he's no fan. He's put out a very restrictive gag order. We saw this in Georgia as well, where a gag order was put on even potential witnesses. I mean, like, how do you enforce a gag order on potential witnesses? I mean, how do you talk if you're a defendant if you could be violating the law and either be fined $1,000 per time you talk for people who are potentially going to be called as witnesses? But this one is so broad that it involves even the judge's daughter, who, by the way, is not a defendant, who is not a witness, but is someone that may be interested to note is a Democrat fundraiser for Adam Schiff. And so, people might want to know those kind of things as this judge is deciding not just the bigger picture about whether or not President Trump and the bigger case involving Alvin Bragg and the business decisions, and of course, but also issues like the gag order, which could amount to a $10,000 a day fine and jail time.
What is the sort of the restrictions of a gag order, and why is it? When is it important? When does it actually work? Yeah,
people who are actually witnesses and jurors who feel like you're going to be threatening them, so that you're going to put their life in jeopardy, so that they may lie or not tell the truth because they're scared of the consequences. So you're not allowed to, witness tamper. It's kind of like witness tamper.
So there's times where it's needed.
Sure. But the problem with President Trump in these cases, and when you have 4 of them going on all around the country, and some are state court, some are city court, and some are federal court, is it's way too broad. And so it involves even the judge's daughter.
Right.
Now, the judge himself, you can be as nasty about as you want. You're allowed to be nasty about the judge. And I get that, again, there's a line even with, like, the judge's daughter.
Sure.
Likely. But I don't think pointing out the facts that she's a Democrat fundraiser, so that when if her dad was to hold, for instance, Donald Trump guilty of violating the gag order, she could use that as an email to raise money for candidates she works for who are Democrats that want to, twice tried to impeach President Trump, and this time want to defeat President Trump in the ballot. The Supreme Court tomorrow is going to hear a major case, ACLJ has filed, Logan, on immunity from criminal prosecution and the presidency. And I want to go to Harry Hutchinson because, Harry, this is a huge case. And again, we'll be able to hear the Supreme Court oral argument, and it's whether or not a president, in our position, the ACLJ, when they have their official acts as presidents, if they are immune from prosecution once they are no longer president. Because we have a Court of Appeals decision right now saying that even when they are, once they are out of being president, that they lose the immunity they would have had, so that you could just keep prosecuting these presidents even for acts that you couldn't have prosecuted them for as president of the United States.
In the final argument scheduled for the 2023-2024 term before the United States Supreme Court, former President Donald Trump will make an historic bid for criminal immunity. It's an important case because it should clarify an important gap, if you will, in constitutional jurisprudence. The question before the Supreme Court justices is whether Trump can be tried on criminal charges that he conspired to overturn the results of the 2020 election. The court's answer will determine whether Trump's trial in Washington, D.C. before Judge Chunkin, which was originally scheduled in March, will go forward, but it also will have implications for whether or not the president's trials in Florida and Georgia go forward. And so the ACLJ has taken a more nuanced approach. I think Donald Trump has asserted essentially blanket immunity. Jack Smith has suggested that once the president leaves office, he loses all immunity, which makes no sense because if Jack Smith's argument is correct, then it compromises the president's independence and the separation of powers between the president and the House of Representatives and Congress. and the judiciary while in office. So this is a hugely important case, and listeners should stay tuned to the opinion, which will likely issue in June.
When you hear the Trump absolute immunity case, I'm curious about that too, because people are probably questioning what that means in terms of obviously what he's dealing with right now in the court in New York. Those are not necessarily connected, but are they all connected? How does that work?
I think they are all connected, and they are connected at a foundational level by politics. So in other words, this is a determined and insistent effort that President Trump be barred from office. And so what the legal minds, particularly on the left, have done is they've gotten together, and there's some evidence that there's coordination with the White House, basically to come up with legal cases which have a political impact. So they're not being driven, these cases are not being driven by the rule of law. They're being driven by the rule of politics. And I think the American people should be aware of that, and they should be aware of the fact that many of the newscasters are offering really a political spin on these legal cases. So, for instance, ABC News is arguing against Trump's immunity claim. Why? Because they argue that Trump lost the last election by 7 million popular votes.
That's right.
Well, popular votes are irrelevant with respect to determining who becomes president. It's determined by the Electoral College. And so it's important for listeners to keep in mind that they will receive a misleading narrative from mainstream news.
Whether you agree with President Trump or you don't is really beside the point, because the statements that have been made and these cases that have happened just feel so soaked in political misconduct, if you will, in terms of the way that we're treating our political opponents. It doesn't feel like they are actually rooted in the law. Now, you could say what you want about certain judges or however it's being run, but you also have the case of presidential immunity that's happening at the same time at the Supreme Court. And this, look, it's not unlike we talked about impeachment, where when you lower the bar for impeachment, now everyone can be impeached. Do I think that Joe Biden should be impeached? I'm not really sure in the traditional sense of everything until this last, let's say decade. No, probably not. However, the rules changed 4 years ago. And now the bar is lowered for what impeachment means. The bar is lowered for all of these things. And that's what's going to happen in the President Trump situation, which is it's not going to be unlike a lot of countries, specifically in the third world, or even countries that in Europe and so forth, where every political leader ends in disgrace. Every political leader ends being thrown out, and a lot of them end up in prison.